Goes in. Okay, so we have about something in your professional career. It doesn't matter how long, could be currently, or it doesn't really matter, and something that you're really thankful for. Most of the research related to stress reduction and developing the neuroscience of empathy and compassion is connected to developing a practice of gratitude. Okay, so just think for a minute, and you can write if you need to, and then just in a sentence. So we do this occasionally as a way to welcome new people as well as to welcome the oldsters in a way that sets a positive tone for the work that we have to do. And I always model, because I think it's not fair if I ask you to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So just think for a minute. You could write something down if you wanted to, and then I'll kind of model. And it's something in your professional career. And maybe something, you know, that supported you as a learner. So it could be even, you know, you as a learner and some specific teacher that supported you in, you know, helping you make a commitment to education. So we'll think for a minute. Okay, so I'm Christelle Estrada. I'm the Title III specialist at the Utah State Board of Education, and I'm grateful for Kay Campbell. She was my 6th grade teacher, and she introduced me into the most interestingly rigorous experience of my life, because it was a multidisciplinary approach to understanding science, social studies, mathematics, history, literacy. So, to Kay Campbell.
I'm Rhonda Bickmore, the ALS teacher specialist at Ogden City School District. And man, a lot of things went through my head, but I think I'm most grateful for the students at the alternative high school that I worked at who motivated me to be a better teacher, because you had to do different things to reach them.
Thank you.
I'm Alexander Key. I'm the ELD coordinator for Guadalupe Charter School in North Salt Lake. And I have to say I'm thankful for my 5th grade teacher, Ms. Sanchez, my only Latina teacher that I ever had, and the one with the biggest attitude, but she whipped us into shape, and she helped us get ready for middle school and high school, and I don't think I've had a more rigorous teacher than Ms. Sanchez. Just the way she taught and the way she demanded success and just excellence from us.
Thank you.
My name's Nathan Moore, and I'm a teacher specialist with the ALS program in Granite School District. And I'm also thankful for my 5th grade teacher. He got me into, I was a slow reader, and he got me interested in reading for pleasure by introducing The Hobbit to our class and really promoting that book and selling it and getting me excited about it. So.
Thanks, Nathan.
I'm Matt Merkley, and I'm the ALS Director for Entheos Academy. I am thankful for the directors I have right now that have given me faith and confidence in myself, and they give me faith and confidence in doing what I do right now.
Thanks, Matt.
I'm Julie Payne. I'm the Federal Programs Facilitator in Cache County School District, and I'm grateful for the talented educators that I work with that continue to teach me. I feel like I'm learning still, and that helps me to become a better educator and serve our students better. So I work with great people.
Thanks, Julie.
I'm Robin Clement. I'm also from Cache School District over Federal Programs, and professionally, I've just really had some really great mentors who were kind, and I want to kind of emphasize that kind. They saw the potential and they were willing to work with that product. And so it's a great opportunity to look at our students and say, same thing. So,
Thanks, Robin.
My name is Hannah Delata. I'm the secondary ELD specialist in Salt Lake City School District, and I'm grateful for Val Gates over at West High and her tireless advocacy for our refugee students there.
Thanks, Hannah.
I'm Peggy Patterson in Salt Lake City School District, ELA and ALS, and I'm grateful for a teacher, specifically Mrs. Bills, 9th grade, that gave me a voice and realized that I did have something to say. But I'm also really grateful for mentors and colleagues for examples and non-examples. So I've learned a lot from non-examples of things and being able to kind of work through those with people when we say, wow, that didn't go as well as we thought. Let's put our heads together and learn from that.
I'm Betty Jimenez, ALS coordinator for Salt Lake City School District, and I'm grateful for my parents and my grandmother who instilled us, my sister and I, having to volunteer. We volunteered for homeless shelters, we volunteered for various organizations in Tucson, Arizona, and I ended up in a gang prevention type I don't know, I wasn't a counselor because I wasn't certified, but anyway, that's what led me to teaching, is that just seeing these kids just struggling, trying to get out of gangs, and I just felt like teaching was that's where I needed to be.
Thank you, Betty.
Hi, I'm Lori Rasmussen from Weaver School District, and I'm over the title programs in Weaver District, and I'm thankful for two things. I couldn't narrow it further, but so many things to be grateful for. But my grandchildren, for one, because it helps keep me focused on the importance of the work that we do for all students. And then my former principal, Kevin Cedarholm, because he taught us the importance of building relationships. And I would see his example daily on how important it is to build those relationships with students and families. And, you know, without that, you could have the best laid plans, but if those relationships aren't in place, you're really not going to get very far. So thankful for his mentoring.
I'm Stephanie Rowley. I am the elementary EL coordinator in Tooele County School District, and I love saying that I'm a newbie, and it's a lot of fun. And I am grateful for a person in this room. She's right here, Peggy Patterson. When you presented this moment, I'm like, I have to take this chance to give thanks to her, because early on in my career, she is the person, she doesn't know this, but I really look up to her because she's the one that changed the trajectory in my career. And she doesn't know this, that she saw potential, and she encouraged me with the early reading first days, and I wouldn't be here today in this room sitting close to her if it weren't for her professionalism, for her encouragement, and for the work that she did many years ago. And so I just have to say that I'm very grateful for her. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie.
And one of my favorite people is sitting next to me, and I'm telling you, this is Heather Tucker, and we work together, and we went to school together, and now we get to work in the same capacity. But I'm Odie Konica at Tooele School District Secondary EL Coordinator, and I'm grateful because talk about self-care. Without people that carry you when you can't carry yourself, you cannot survive in this profession, and she's done that for me. So I absolutely love her.
Thank you.
I'm Heather Tucker. I'm from Summit Academy down in Bluffdale, Draper area. I'm the assistant principal at our Bluffdale campus. When I thought of who has encouraged me in my profession, in my career as an administrator, I think of one particular administrator, principal that I had when I was in Idaho. There was always such a great example of positivity and just his commitment to the kids. He was always there for the kids. and just his example. He was always willing to give me many, I was a teacher at the time, and he was always willing to give me many opportunities to learn and grow in many different capacities, and that kind of sparked my interest in administration, and I really appreciate him for that.
Thank you.
I grew up on a farm, and was a poor farm boy that grew up in a home that parents said that I'd never see the day that I'd ever graduate from high school. And 2 counselors pulled me out of class my senior year and asked me if I was going to go to college. And I looked them in the face and I said no, lowering my head, and said no. And they said, why? And I said, well, I'm not an academic person and I have no money. And they said, well, if we need to send you to school, would you graduate early and would you go? And I raised my head and said yes. And I'm so grateful for those 2 counselors to give me that opportunity.
You want to say your name?
I'm Larry Abraham. I'm the Federal Programs Director for Tooele County School District.
Thanks, Larry. Larry, do you want to give that microphone to Wade in the back?
Nice try. Nice try. Yeah. Yeah, I thought so. Is it on? Yeah.
Remember,
so I'm Wade, my love.
I was a teacher. You remember that, so my eyes are everywhere.
Yeah, no sneaking in here. So, Wade, my love, Nebo School District, ESL, ALS specialist down there for about 20 years now. I didn't hear what you were saying, but I've gathered we're supposed to say something we're thankful for.
Yep.
So I'm thankful for a really long history of educators in my family, including my parents, my grandparents, and a great grandfather who was in the Martin handcart companies, who came and helped settle Payson. And then the school that I've been located at for 34 years is named after him, Taylor Elementary. So it's just been a long line of educators. But more than that, I'm just thankful as I look back at 34 years in education of just so many experiences that have kind of just guided me and put me where I am right now. And I'm just thankful for all those things that have happened. So.
Thanks, Wade.
Good morning. My name is Mark Hansen. I do the ELL assessment and data for Davis School District. And I'm grateful for the exposure that I have had to the trials and challenges of underprivileged children, kids that come to us that are disadvantaged because of a language background or cultural background or socioeconomic backgrounds. And I, as an overprivileged European American male in this society, don't always see and understand those things that are happening right here around us. And so it's, I think, built within me a tolerance and an acceptance and a realization that the things that I can do to help and maybe make a change for some of these children.
I'm Promise Larson. I work in the secondary EL program in Davis District, and I'm thankful for our Latinos in Action program. It's not only helped us with our graduation rates, which are really good, but to watch our LIA kids, when you talk to people and they talk about teenagers and they're lazy. High school kids do service like our LIA kids do, and they do it willingly and happy, and they're great examples to me, so I'm thankful for that program.
About the way she individually saw this painfully shy, quiet soul, and the things that she did were very specific to maybe an interest that I had and some abilities that I had that I didn't know. And she drew me out. She changed my life forever, and I so appreciated her.
Okay, you say your name, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Nancy Ward with Jordan. I'm the Federal Programs Coordinator there.
Thanks, Nancy.
Good morning. I'm Connie Ziegler. I work in Davis School District as an elementary ESL coordinator, and I'm thankful for for all the leaders that have influenced me and given me support and encouragement throughout the years, especially. I've always known that relationships are important, but my principal last year, Midori Clough, and the school secretary at Doxie Elementary were instrumental in reaffirming the importance of building relationships with students.
Thanks, Connie.
Hi, I'm Shelley Hayes. I work at American Prep Academy, and I'm one of the compliance members for Title III on a group. Couple things I'm grateful for. First, I've lived kind of all over the country, and it's really given me a great perspective of diversity, and I don't think we can do this job without appreciating diversity. California had its own unique things, in Nebraska and East Coast too, so it's been really fun to grow up with that diversity appreciation. And then also I'm very new at this, and I appreciate all the people who have answered my questions and helped me along, especially doing that grant. It was kind of crazy for me because I didn't know. New to this school and new to this EL stuff, so it was pretty interesting, and I had a lot of great people answering questions, so I'm very appreciative.
Thanks, Shelley.
I'm Letitia Martinez from Utah Military Academy in Riverdale. I guess I'm grateful for the trials that I've had that have helped me become more confident and stronger in this learning process, because it's a new thing to our school. I don't think anybody's really familiar with Title III there. I started ESL last year, but I'm still new to all the other aspects that go with ESL. So I'm grateful for those that have taught me in the past and the confidence that I have that I can do this.
Thank you, Letitia.
My name's Arlene Anderson, and I'm from South San Pete School District in rural Utah. And I am they call me the program director, so I have lots of hats to say. I had two thoughts come to me. The first one was, I lived in Hawaii for 15 years, and I have 4 beautiful children that came to a special delivery. And I think they've taught me probably the most important thing, just to love, and I'm grateful for that. And I have a weird one. It's my first grade teacher who was really mean, and I remember having a horrible experience in first grade, and she taught me that I wanted to be better than that. And I became a first grade teacher and learned to love and nurture kids. And that was probably the hardest job to leave, to go to the district office to become an administrator. But I've tried to touch the lives of kids in a different way in that role. So.
Thanks, Arlene.
I'm Dinah Scott. I'm the ESL specialist in the Washington County School District in St. George. And I'm grateful for the families of the English learners that I've worked with, especially the refugee families and immigrant families. I just admire and am so inspired by their courage and their perseverance. So those parents and families are amazing.
Thanks, Dinah, and thanks for traveling up and visiting with us. We really appreciate your effort and Randy's support. Welcome.
I'm Beverly Herman from Canyon School District, and I am grateful for my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Hubbs, who taught me that being a teacher wasn't just about the curriculum map and the standards. Each week she would bring in and set up a little station of, I was in a Title I school, and she would bring in peppermint tea at Christmas time, and you could try little things, or she would bring in fresh green beans, not from a can, and she would just let you try them and see if you liked them. And it really, and she did it during recesses, and everybody stayed in because they wanted to try whatever she had, because it was always so new. So, and then I would be remiss if I didn't thank my husband for, first of all, encouraging me to go back and get my master's degree. When I thought I didn't have time, he made time. And then when this position opened up in Canyons as the ALS administrator, I wasn't sure I had what it took, and he said, you have what it takes, apply, and I did, and here I am. So,
thank you, Bev.
I'm Karen Sterling. I'm the Director of Student Advocacy and Access in Canyons. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be grateful, so thank you. Thinking back on my career, over 40 years ago, I met Dr. Verna Tripp, who was my principal and ultimately became my great mentor to help me go into administration. And at that time, I was one of only 3 women principals in Granite District. So those of you who know how big Granite is, you can see how the tide has turned. And so it's delightful to see so many women and so many diverse people, ethnic backgrounds and languages and opportunities and rich heritage come and broaden the impact we can have on kids. I'd also like to just say that one of the things that Verna taught me was that sometimes, especially if you're a type A driven personality, none of you are that way, I'm sure, but you have to learn how to bend so you don't break. You have to learn how to set priorities for your efforts. And you have to learn, as you said down here, how to have a wonderful confidant and friend for those hard times. And recently I spent an hour with someone in this room who rekindled that ability in me to set priorities and regroup and challenged me. And I put a card on my mirror and in the morning when I'm brushing my teeth, and it says every day, how can I impact the lives of the children with whom we work? And sometimes from a district perspective, that seems far away. But just thinking about that in a way of being proactive and doing what I can every day has made a huge difference in just 4 days. And so I'm very grateful for that.
Oh my goodness, I should say ditto. I have so much to be grateful about. But I wanted to say, more importantly, I am so grateful for all of the immigrant students and families I get to work with, learn from, and be humbled by. This is on a daily basis. I'm just amazed. And not only, more importantly, the opportunity to see them for the assets that they have and the great contributions that they have to our educational system. And I don't think I would have been able to see that this day without the mentorship and without the collegiality and the knowledge that exists in this room. And one of those people is Karen Sterling, who the past decade really has mentored me to be where I'm at today. I'm very grateful for that and for continuing to have that vision. And what drives me to support students is who they are.
So, Annalise, do you want to say, like, your new position? And,
Sorry.
It's all right. Yeah.
So, Annalise Ruiz, I'm the Title I, Title III Director for Alpine School District.
Thank you. So as you can see that we're, an extremely powerful and courageous group. So I'm going to summarize some things that you said that I think are really important. You talked about strong relationships, and the way in which you talked about them was about learning. That we're all learners together, and so the kind of feedback that we need to help us even be more than we think we are is really important. Most people have a very limited view of themselves based on whatever story they've told themselves. So, but you actually identified people who could see in you something that you didn't see in yourself, right? So that's what we need to do with each of our students. So the students that we work with and their families are assets. They're resources for our own learning. They help us become more human. They're not those children. They're not somebody else's children. They're our children. That's pretty clear. And then I think the other piece is really important is that, I hang out with a lot of weird philosophy types. And their definition of beauty, and this is Alfred North Whitehead, is the experience of ideal contrasts. If you went to the great cathedrals, one in particular in France, you would actually see the beauty of it because of the detail and the contrast. And great art understands that contrast makes things more vibrant. So for us to acknowledge that those who are different than us make us better human beings and have a more beautiful existence is really important, right? So there are children. Okay, so we're going to have lots of fun today because we're going to talk about the Utah Grants Management System, which is, you know, a big it's a big learning curve. It's a big learning curve. I've actually put index cards on your tables, and I'm just going to review the agenda briefly, and then we're going to do some conversations, and you're going to generate some questions. And here's the goal. The goal is that, you know, it's been made very clear that the Utah State Board of Education and the people who serve here serve at your pleasure, right? We're working to serve you. So my goal is to learn from you and with you how to make things not just, you know, the argument of efficiency. It's not about that. It's about how do we want to spend our time to do the things that we're grateful for. When you talked about the things that you're grateful for and, you know, our kind of obligation in relationship to our children and their families, the only way we do that is we help to work together to create the way in which adults work together to benefit children. So that means in your position as ALS directors in federal programs, working with curriculum directors, working with accountability specialists, with research is really important. And it's going to even be more important when next year the state accountability and school grades are going to be determined 9% of, you know, if English learners make their annual growth goals, right? So in some way, it's at this critical time when external circumstances are making us more accountable for children who deserve a quality, rigorous educational environment, right? And parents actually know the difference between the kind of educational experiences their children have as English learners, immigrants, and refugees, and the other kind of educational experiences that English-only children have. Every parent focus group has said this. They know. So we have to get over ourselves in relationship to being courageous with curriculum people, literacy people, math people, content specialists. We have to work in a very strategic way. Okay, so if you look at the agenda, I just wanted to make sure, if you look at it, it says, by the end of the meeting, participants will have provided feedback on all the items in the agenda and asked clarifying questions. Now, the only way things get better in a systems approach is that the people who are most closely directed by the decisions should have the most impact, right? So they should have the most influence. So the decisions and policy decisions that are made at the state board, you're affected by that, right? I mean, obviously. So the point is that this meeting is a chance for you to look at the things that we, and that I personally, can make a commitment to trying to make better, right? Because changing systems is, you know, I won't say impossible, but it ends up being pretty challenging. Because people usually are comfortable in doing things the way they've always done them, even though they don't really work for children. So if you look at this, I'm going to reiterate the purpose of the redesign of the Title III. When I have focus groups with principals and district people, I try to set the context. This is not about compliance and being kind of hard-nosed and compliance-driven and doing the minimalistic approaches to making sure that we're not in trouble, right, by the legislative auditors or by the federal auditors or by whatever. It's not that. It's really about building the capacity of every district to evaluate effective language programs to ensure that English learners actually have a future. So do you want me to say that again? It's this responsibility, it's our responsibility to ensure that the capacity of every single adult in a district is clear about whether language programs work for kids or not. The only way you evaluate the effectiveness of programs is based on student results. That's the point of the application. You evaluate the effectiveness of your program based on what's happening with the learners. Are the learners in every single grade, in every single school, meeting their annual growth goals? And if they're not, how come we don't know? Right? How come the principals don't know? Or if they do know, how are they supported by the district to change what's going on? You see? So really what we're working for, and it's what somebody said here, we're actually working for every child in Utah, because the economic growth of Utah depends, right, on the educational opportunities of every child. So that's kind of what we're trying to do here. So I'm trying to organize this so you can see the long-term consequences of valuing the assets and the diversity in culture and language that we have here. There's no culture that is a deficit. We should be learning, right, from other people's cultural experiences. So that's what Twain says when he talks about, travel, about how we face our prejudices when we travel and we meet different people. Well, we have an opportunity in Utah because we don't have to travel, right? We can just spend time with families that we have. Okay, and then feedback to support adjusted practices supported by fiscal decisions based on student data. Parents and families and other people are now using the complaint system from the internal auditing, the USB internal audits. So I've received 2 huge major complaints from the internal auditing department that's separate, it's in USBE, about the way in which funds are used for Title III programs that don't produce results for students. So now we have a situation which is an opportunity, because families are getting wiser and they're registering their complaints. So the question is, how do we become more skillful in responding to the needs of families based on what the families want for their children? And I'm talking about families who don't speak English and families who are poor. Those are the children I'm talking about. And then it says the use of student data for the Title III grant application with the completed self-monitoring tool. I changed it to from self-assessment to self-monitoring. Now, I really believe, I was a high school English teacher, well, and also a government and economics teacher and, a few other things. So language is really important. When I use self-assessment with students, I found out that I actually, and university students that I taught, I had to actually do a weighted calculation for my assessment based on the quality of their work, because there were 2 kinds of students who assessed themselves. One were the really incredibly self-deprecating students who underestimated themselves so much that they would give themselves, very low scores. This happened in a Socratic seminar with a bunch of gang members that I worked with. And they all said to James, you know what, that's too low. This is all the evidence that you used based on this question. So if we have a group of kids figuring out that, you're not assessing yourselves appropriately, then it's obvious that we need to figure out how the adults can do that better. Then we had kids, I had students, who, for whatever reason, and in college classes, had some kind of exceptionalism trauma or whatever, and they would assess themselves really way beyond. They had no evidence at all for the way in which they assessed the work that they were doing. So this, I'm going to show you the changes in the self-assessment tool that will be, you don't have to do it now, but you can do it next year in the cycle. And the reason I'm doing that is that there were some applications that I got that people just put no evidence and then just put compliant. Okay, so then I had to send it back, right? So the problem with that is, unless the application, it's not like the DMI anymore or the UCA. If it's not approved, you can't ask for reimbursements, right? I mean, you just can't ask for reimbursements. So I'm trying to provide well-scaffolded support, get this, in relationship to English learners becoming more proficient in English, well-scaffolded support so that you can have a clearer idea of the work that you need to do with English learners based on how you're monitoring your own abilities. You see what I'm saying? You're building the capacity of your district to work together in a way that you don't have these competing forces. You don't have the curriculum people making decisions for the ALS people and saying, we don't want to include you for whatever strange reason. Because you just say to those people, okay, you realize that 9% of the grade that every school is going to get is going to be based on, progress for English learners. So don't you think the literacy people and the ALS people and the curriculum people and the content people should be working together? So I'm trying to give you strategic tools to make that change in your district, right? And if you need me to come and mediate or whatever, I'm happy to do that as well. It's not a problem. So the new grants management system, if we're going to spend some time on that. I'm trying to, and I just want to thank the people at Granite, because when the November 1st deadline at 5 o'clock happened, and I went in to start looking at the, I didn't actually realize that they had divided the 2018 budget from the 2019 budget. So when I went to the 2018 budget, nothing was there. I mean, the required documents hadn't been uploaded. And I'd actually seen the work because I'd been on a visit at Granite. So I actually knew they had done all the work, right? So I called them and I said, I cannot find, anything that you uploaded. And they said, oh, we uploaded it. And I said, well, where did you upload it? And they said, oh, it was in the 2019 budget. So I had to learn so thank you, Granite. Or else I would have been thinking, okay, well, nobody uploaded anything, and I don't know what I'm going to be doing, calling everybody, at midnight. So that's the thing that I think is really important. Now, why do you think that they divided up the year for federal programs into two separate fiscal years? So why do you think they did that? We're talking about financial ops. So previously, remember, you would have like 24 months to request reimbursements. So what do you think might have motivated the financial ops people and the internal auditors to suggest that we divide up federal funding that way?
It would be based on whether your ELs are progressing or not, no?
No. Okay, so let's say you have 24 months to apply for reimbursements, right? Because at the end of 24 months, that means that we're sending back hundreds of thousands of dollars to the federal government. So the underlying assumption is when state legislators who now have access to the system, because it's actually in the, before it was separate, now it's all public. And they see that we're sending money back to the federal government and somebody is making an argument that you need more money. The logical response by state legislators is, you're not spending the money you have. You see? So we're trying to mitigate that by helping you ask for reimbursements when you incur the cost within a fiscal year. You see? So this means that your relationship with the business administrator, and anybody who has responsibility for budgets, you have to have a good So I'm going back to the relationship thing. You have to actually have a good relationship with them, right? You have to go to them and say, look, here's a quarter, here's a fiscal quarter in year 2018, and we haven't asked for any reimbursements. And it's very clear, as soon as the cost is incurred, you have to ask for reimbursement. Because then you have the evidence, right, right? You have the evidence for the reimbursement. If you wait for 24 months and then you're asking for a reimbursement, the likelihood of you having the kind of evidence that is now required is slim to none. So then guess what happens? The district has to do what? They have to incur the cost because it's not going to be reimbursed. So we're just trying to create a system that supports you in being more collaborative in your district, right? So, and the grants management system, so I clarified that for you. That's clarification 1. And then the question is, what have we learned about the new system and the USBE support necessary? So this is the other thing. Okay, so if people haven't spent their money from 2017 and the deadline is September 30th, right, of 2018, so they haven't spent the money before, I found out in particular that the federal grant expires, right, September 30th. Now, if you haven't expended the money, we work really hard to get everything organized for you so that you can actually ask for reimbursement. Because the last day ends up being that the feds won't let us draw down any money for the reimbursements. So that means if you have 20,000 outstanding or 10,000 or 50,000 or 100,000, you won't get that money. Right? So the point I'm making is that this is not about blame, this is about relationships and working really strategically and using funds effectively. Right? So because there was a single Title I audit, usually there are lots of legislative audits that happen with us. There's like 3 or 4 or 5 that happen all the time. If you look at 1.2.1, there are like numbers of approvers. So when I approve, okay, you can't even get reimbursements because guess what? There are 2 other people who have to approve what I've approved. Okay, so I look at your application, and then maybe I don't approve it and ask recommendations and say you can change it this way and this way and this way, and then you send it back to me, like as soon as possible. Then I approve it, and then I have to send it down to the financial ops. When it goes down to financial ops, it's on the desk of the first approver. Then it goes from the first approver to the second approver. You see? So I'm trying to show you that it takes time. You have all this time because you have all these people who have to approve it. Now, the reason all these people have to approve it is because the legislative auditors are very clear, as we've tried to be clear, in general, is that if you don't have somebody checking either the application so that it's complete or the documentation for the reimbursements, then the people who are at fault are who? We're at fault because we're supposed to be helping. We're supposed to actually be helping you, right? So I always get horrified when I think I haven't done something to help you that will pretty much, keep you out of trouble. And that's why relationships are really important. Right. If you're the experts in Title III and all the decisions about the way in which Title III funds as supplemental are used, but you have no input, that's like a little weird, it seems to me. The people who have the expertise, right, should be the ones that would be influencing based on student outcomes with the assessment director, right, and your school report card, how you would actually be assessing and using funds. You see, to me, it just seems logical. But typically, it's like when people get stuck in doing something the way they've always done it, they just do it that way, right? So what we're trying to do is to support and scaffold your experience so you can have more advocacy in your district. Okay, so then if you look at 1.2.2, the number of approvers for reimbursements. So it's me, and then I'll look at it and see if, because in the new system it says, you know, the invoice number, the receipts, and whatever. So you'll be able to, you know, actually upload the evidence for the, you know, here you spend something and then obviously there's evidence for how you spent money. So as soon as you spend the money, you upload the evidence, and then you know, and it'll say pending tasks, and I'll go in and I'll say, oh, good. You know, I'll be really happy, and then I'll send you an email and thank you profusely. Oh, you put in your reimbursement. I've approved it. Okay, but you realize there's an approver 1. So the Title III auditor that you met, Tammy. So she's going to check me because, you know, I make mistakes. So she's going to check me. And then there's approver 1 in financial ops, and there's approver 2 in financial ops for your reimbursements. Okay, because I have to actually sign something in the grants management system that is, it's almost a legal responsibility that you have done the right thing. I mean, I have to sign it for you because I'm reviewing it. I'm the first reviewer. And because I'm the first person, the underlying assumption is the person who knows something about language development and what is good for English learners would look at your programmatic issues and say, well, this is how we can help you. And that's why the visits are so important. When we give you recommendations, the underlying assumptions is that the recommendations based on what we observed in classrooms is going to support you in being more strategic, right? I mean, that's the point of the recommendations. Okay, so I'm going to finish, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually give you time to talk to each other. And the question is, what are your questions and what are we learning about the new system and what would make it better? For you, don't worry about me. I mean, I'll adjust to whatever you need, and I'll be the advocate for you so we can get it taken care of, right? But I tried to explain clearly why this is like so important. You know, because there are people who say they're not going to vote for any they're not going to vote for any extra funding in education because funds aren't used. Because if you look at the student outcomes and the legislature sees that there are no student increases in outcomes, they're really clear, and as well as the people who are voting. They'll say, if we don't see anything different, then we're not going to vote for more funding for schools. So you see the problem? It's not a problem. It's just trying to help us be more strategic in how we use funds so that it impacts outcomes for students. Okay. So I'm just going to give you time to talk about what are your questions about the new system, what are we learning, what would make it better for you, how can Christelle help you or advocate for you, whatever. And then you're going to write all kinds of questions on your cards, and then we're going to take a little bit of break, and then I'll actually go through them and we'll address them. Now, the reason I'm doing this is really important. Okay, I've tried to say 50 million ways that I'm actually advocating for you. So there's no reason to be anxious or nervous about what I'm thinking about you. Okay, this has nothing to do with me thinking anything about you. It's really about me working for you, right? So, and also some people were worried because they thought this haircut was because I was sick. No, I'm too ornery to be sick. This has nothing to do with me being sick, anything. So I don't want people to worry about me. Okay, so you can meet together, talk. We're going to talk for about 10 minutes. You're going to write all your questions. As soon as you finish talking, 10, 15 minutes, and get up, take a break, and then bring the questions up here, and I'll start sorting them. And you can put your name if you want, or you don't have to. It doesn't really matter. You just do whatever. Okay? So whatever your questions are. Clarification. Yeah, you can have, it can be a question, a recommendation, anything, any kind of feedback that would really help you all. Okay. Hi, welcome, sweetheart. Nice to have you here. Thank you for coming.
Waiting for things from the state. Yay, good.
You can use my chair. Can I sit with you guys?
Yes, please. Sitting by me, don't do anything.
Hi.
Oh, with the grant system.
Oh, please.
So,
That's my chair. One of
I'm not sure why they had done that. Somebody asked them for more access and they said, so just not I had to ask based on data. Did they do it? Because my direct boss accidentally did one pushed on my name and they told her to do it.
Oh, but I wouldn't even open them, like I go by the title, like they were in. But they send them, I mean, they got you can send it.
Yeah.
They give the individual, you get all the grants, everybody in that.
Could you see where she was talking about? She was talking it out. Comments or whatever. Where is that going to be? So here's the home. And those are in those.
Yeah, I think it's 2 or 3 years of Sage and
So we have done that, but they're
I just say, I mean, not that she would have put any notes in there, but
because it was given.
Oh, well, yeah.
So I just don't know where we go for, I mean, I was so, but then they are changing. Was she talking about I'm not sure. Was she talking about but when she was talking about like 1.2 and all these things, she was talking about all of this, right? Okay, I'm like, so I don't know anything about, so she knew about the, you know, when the actual application. I think she made and it's about and as far as reimbursements, this I have to do that. I have where'd you go to do that? 18. I think that's do you want to be here with but there's no way
I don't use the grant management system that much.
I don't either. I mean, every day.
She drives it every day.
You can't do like much of it.
Yes.
So,
They said that they have separated.
That's not, you're going to have to you only have a 12 yesterday. So you're not doing their reimbursements, like, well, you, I don't think, because, okay, so that's no.
Upon that, she said, applying for the reimbursement immediately.
Yeah, so I've changed that. Are you going to the reimbursement, so reimbursement, like, yeah, but it's, our business
Sounds like you need her to go.
No, I did get a read. asked, I tried to want to, if they were selling insurance to get that money, it was like, you changed it.
Maybe they overwrote it.
And so,
But can we get a time?
he was able to do it, but I haven't done it. Let me show you. Let me get it, and I'll show you. Okay.
Right now, oops, sorry. I mean, Sean, I can't.
In fact, they told me, do not touch anything that says okay, that says 18. So you're 18. You didn't want anything in on 18? No, my business people did it based on last year's plan. And then I did 19. Okay, so she didn't actually put in 18, that's why it was. I put in, though, the information on Title I, and but I still,
nobody put 18 grant information.
no, I just put CRDA, but we put our
it was just the carryover. You know, how
I'll show you how it looks on my
it's really relatively easy. It's just a matter of knowing that each one has I need to
She said that choose from the car. That tells me public funds schools and others.
well, maybe that's because I think there's a big outside maybe we should have July. What we were told is
She also says to make sure that there is no compliance
because they told me I had money all mine, and then I had to shoot them of where the money was, and I had to remember all of it. That's why when you until it switches over, it doesn't reimbursement. The ones that they had.
Okay, I can't even find mine now. Where are I'm not trying to find mine. I'm still not navigating this well. But do we not have one that has our own? But when it came to here, 18, that was our business.
So maybe that was Leon said
And even 17C, we still have some 17. It was very little like something like But I opened Title I at 18, and my accountant I was told, got it, and they had to put one up there. Well, I don't know if they got it, but he's the one, we were at our conference, and he said, you gotta do this, are you okay if I do the reimbursement request? And I said, yes. I was at the same stage. You never had raises, right? So I don't talk to you. I don't know, how would I tell? 9%. So that is the 20%. So how would I be able to tell?
Let's just say I don't verify process for is the person who owns it is lower, or is it the business owner? Because there's, or is it a district-based position?
And do we, is there a place where we can find just the ones that we manage?
Those are it. Other than that, the grants is
Okay, under applications, wait, I don't see activities. Where did you go? Up here, applications. I don't have activities on mine. Yeah, view applications. Oh, I didn't see activities. View applications. Oh, but I still have to find them. I don't have a place where I, just the ones I own.
That's where it's assigned to yourself. So these are mine.
Well, these aren't all mine, though.
But they're, do you have anything that? Yeah, Stella.
Thanks. Some of these are pretty basic, but that's all right, sweetheart. Don't worry about it.
I know. So I think, what did I hit there? I hit view applications. Is that what I I did? No, I did completed tasks.
Okay, so make sure you give me your cards and then take a break. And then we'll come back at, is that 10? We'll start again at 10:15, so make sure I get the cards.
Is there a place? Well, I'll just ask the question.
I think that when you got the documentation, it makes you wonderful. I was just saying, that's exactly what I was saying. But honestly, when you I went in and I put in the numbers, but she got James helps.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Positive.
Yes. Yeah, Kelly Smith. Yeah. She's the one that ended up reassigning.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, sweetheart. It's Alexander, right?
Yes, ma'am. Or Alex.
Alex?
My mom calls me Alexander from the show.
And you know the other thing, you know you have to put in like your rationale for, your plan rationale for that project, but yeah, I kept looping around eventually.
So remember, you have lots of questions, so make sure you bring up your cards.
It goes too over.
My main questions were with Lori's. We just mainly want more information on the growth goals and how we figured those and all that.
You don't figure
I
any
asked
of
that
it.
question.
So that's why that's the next part of the agenda.
Yeah, because that would really be helpful.
We actually had to do an amendment to the ESSA plan because the calculations from here were wrong.
So I can.
Oh, really?
And then you
That's
go
hard.
to overview. That's
I'm
where
just
you
curious.
would. Where did you go for
Calendar
that?
for them. I'd like to know exactly how they're figured. Well, first of all, what they are, because I'm not really sure what they are.
Well,
And how they're calculated.
Well, when we get to the agenda, you'll see. And then the next time because the report card,
Yeah, that's my type.
so all the new calculations will be on the new report card. And nobody's even seen the new report card.
And
There's a
when I
mock-up
first
of it.
opened up and I was on
And I
could
went
see
and
my
looked at it, but it doesn't have any data. I mean, it has mock-up data, it's not real data. So that's why I didn't want to show you guys, because then I thought you'd think, that there was some data in it. But I've seen it. So once, it's supposed to come out by the end of November, the actual school report card that is used now for accountability, the whole thing had to be redesigned. So then we're hoping.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, I'll be,
See all that.
well,
That works.
I'll be interested too. When I started looking at it, I thought, it did long-term ELs, it did, the annual growth goals, it did all that kind of stuff. But then, it also has the academics as well.
I know.
And then it's percentages based on, so that's why I know 9% of the school grade will be based on the annual growth goals. But I don't know how they're going to calculate the annual growth goals based on individual kids related to a district score. It'll be just a school score.
Yeah. See, that's all
See what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's like some strange, it's like, some huge algorithm that nobody can understand.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Good.
kind of.
You doing good?
Yeah, how about you?
Life's good.
I know, I like what you said.
I don't like winter so much.
Yeah, I'm not that big of a, well, I shouldn't say I'm not that big, I like fall.
I love fall.
Because I think fall is like the perfect time, and I like spring.
Yeah?
But that summer kills me. And I used to be a kid, in Southern California, I used to love the summer. Like I was always hanging out at the beach. But, I just can't tolerate the summer anymore.
And I still like summer better than spring. The cold just kind of
gets to your bones.
Yeah, just kind of like.
See, but we're lucky because this is a dry cold. In August I was down in I was down in California, and I was camping, and it was near Northern California and the ocean. It was so damp, and it was only like 60 degrees. It was like 70 degrees, and I was like, I came out and I was like freezing. I kept on thinking, oh, save me now, save me now, save me now. So we're kind of lucky if it's dry.
Okay.
Okay, Wade.
So we're going to start doing but we didn't have that to begin with, so we moved on to text
Because I accessed that building eligibility.
Okay, you have 5 more minutes, so you should stand up, take a break, walk around.
Thanks, you guys. And after Thanksgiving, and I'll ask you to just figure out whatever this person. Yeah, together that, okay, parent contact. That would be great. I would like to know what you learned too, so. Yeah, perfect.
I don't know anything about that.
I told you. Email, answering, text, and all that stuff. Yes, it is good. It is good. How can next year?
So how are you, sweetheart? How are you doing?
Did you get your did you bring your ticket? Did you park it inside? Like safe space, or did you park on the outside of the yard space? Your family learning. You did. How many did it? Never closed. I've been trying like crazy to find the.
Yeah, I was waiting. I sat that way.
I know what. And I wanted to like write it. Let me see if I can. I think I might want to have it. I want to have it. So I looked for Jen. Yeah. And I couldn't because I wanted to. I wanted to really take the right. I was just going to say, don't forget to bring your ticket so that you can get it stamped. Yeah. Like I'm trying to think of the author. He's a researcher from I can't remember. Delta. I'll look it up and then I'll send it to you. I'll send you the exact wording. Great. Karen and I were practicing our when you start going off, I'll go, okay, wait. See? Yep. So, okay, I'm just going to keep, so I make sure I'm completely clear. So if a parent marks 1 year, we screen, but the next year, they mark all English. You said you need to check with the parent, right? So that means, you marked this last year, but you didn't. If they say we don't want our student identified, that's fine. Okay, do we take them off?
Yes.
No longer mark them as an EL?
No, they're an EL, but remember they opt out of services.
Okay, and you said they still have to opt out yearly, but opting out,
She said it's just a buzzer.
they can't opt out of the.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, because remember that's the way the state legislation is. And if you look on the assessment website, it'll have all the because the previous board, we don't know what the new board's going to do. On the previous board, there's a huge list of all the things that parents could opt out, because when I first got here, I made an argument that they couldn't opt out of Title III, but they can. I mean, the test.
Yeah, we all argued that because the state trumped that.
Yeah, I wondered too, but I guess it does.
I guess they can.
Well, part of the issue is the opt-out rates and what that actually means. But if the state board is very clear that here is what we set in policy in relationship to opt-out, right, and parents can opt out of these tests, then you have to do that, because that's not really the federal requirement. The federal requirement is 95%.
Oh, I just read it. The federal requirement is 100%.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay. So, Robin and I had talked with you last time about joining you on some of these visits.
Yeah.
And you talked about looking at a date in February, but you didn't give us a date. You wanted to get back to us.
Okay.
I wondered if you had chosen that already.
Yeah, George.
You guys get to go and I'll start the class.
Okay, George said it. Great.
Please.
No, you sign up on this. What do you want, a peer review experience?
It really is.
You sign up here. Okay, so we should set one of those days we want. Yep.
And the tool is
Okay, so we have a minute before we start. Thank you. Isn't this fun?
Here's, I don't know if this was a question or not. It was in these blank ones. Or it might have been left from last time.
It is. Okay, so some of these questions are related to the agenda. So if you go to your agenda and look at, so I'm not going to talk about the revisions yet for the application, but look at, oh, look at the data information. See where it says 1.5 on the second page? Because some of your questions are related to this. So I thought I'd just kind of point you on the agenda. So it's 1.5 data information that can be used for updating both the application and the assessment tool. Now, the application was a challenge because the question about evaluating your language program is actually based on student data, right? And so you didn't have it, and the reason you didn't have it for EL, was, and this is thanks to Ogden that pointed it out, there was a problem with the actual calculation related to the trajectory for becoming proficient. They had put a 0.4, which is linear and has nothing to do with when a student enters, right? The grade that the student enters and the actual proficiency level of the student when they enter, right? So then, which would mean that our expectations for English learners was something like, oh, okay, well, if you're proficient in, 10 years, that's fine with us. Okay, so that was like a major problem, right? So then we had to actually submit an amendment for the application because now Title III accountability is in Title I, right? And Title III accountability is also in state accountability. So now there's no separation. Okay, so on the agenda, it says the school level data will be released with the 2018 school report cards. With the addition of the EL progress indicator under ESSA, each school will receive the percentage of ELs making adequate progress and the percentage of ELs who've reached proficiency. The report, and I've seen a mock-up. They haven't even finished it. I've seen a mock-up of the school report cards. Now remember, these are school report cards. The report card will be released to schools and LEAs in late November and released to the public on December 10th.
Quick question. So they are doing two different dates? Because the last week I had heard it was one date all in December.
I don't know. The problem with having one date, which is December 10th, means that districts and the public get the same information at the same time, and I think all of you who work in districts know that that could be problematic, because then you wouldn't know what the public is seeing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's usually...
So let me find out, but I heard from Anne Michelle that this was the date.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure. Okay, but you have to do it.
Yep.
Okay, so when you ask questions, right, you have to use the microphone because there are people online.
Okay. Is the formula for making adequate progress then, you sent something out about a month ago or so that had
That's what we're going to get to.
Great. Okay.
So then, so at the time you will be able to analyze EL progress by school. Okay, now the reason this is important. So what we've tried to do with classroom observations and using a tool that helps anyone who observes a classroom understand what quality EL instruction looks like, which all your literacy and content coaches should use. I said should, but you can do whatever you want. But if you have literacy coaches and math coaches and science coaches and achievement coaches not actually knowing what EL instruction, good EL instruction looks like, and you continually hear people say it's just good literacy instruction, okay, I'm just telling you that's wrong. Language acquisition is not just good literacy instruction. Okay, so using those tools are really important. I have another one that Nevada uses and designed by Stanford about how language functions in the classroom. And I'm looking for volunteers to come with me and volunteers to visit classrooms. But it has to be in your own district. It can't be in another district, right? So if there's any principal who's interested, and it's not an official, it's not an official visit or anything like that, but we're actually trying out this new tool. And I'll send it to you. I don't think I have sent it to you. The tool that we use, shows what well-scaffolded instruction looks like, the visual cues, the language cues, the kinesthetic cues. We've seen probably some of the best instruction I've ever seen in my life in certain schools and in certain grade levels, which ends up being a little ironic since you could go to the grade next door and the instruction just is not as quality as the instruction of the person next to them. So then the question for, all of you is, how are you working with principals to support the way in which grade level teams are not burnt out by being frustrated with no results, when in fact someone in the school could actually show them what it really looks like? Right? So that's one of the purposes of the visits, instead of having people making excuses or blaming teachers or blaming principals or blaming districts or blaming, it's kind of a waste of energy. Why don't we just highlight the things that are extraordinary and then see how we can replicate them by supporting them? I mean, that just seems logical. Okay, so are you ready to see what we sent to the Department of Ed? It's on your agenda. It's just an excerpt. It's from the USBE letter to the Secretary of Education. And I've seen a mock-up of the report card, of the school report cards. Okay. But you're not going to see them until they're updated with the most recent data, because it doesn't help just to see the mock-up, because then you get, it just makes you more stressed out than you don't need to be. So this letter is to request an amendment of the approved ESSA Consolidated State Plan for Utah for the English Learner Progress ELP indicator. Utah is seeking an amendment for this indicator to establish a more equitable approach to setting adequate growth targets for each English learner in our state. Okay, so you get this? Each English learner in the state. In this amendment, we wish to maintain the exit criteria of a 5.0 on WIDA. Now, that's the state-adopted assessment. I got a phone call from someone who said, can we do any assessment? Okay. No, you can't do any assessment. You have to do WIDA. How can, the logic of it doesn't make sense to me, because there's no way that you would actually identify baseline and longitudinal or anything like that. It just is kind of odd. But anyway. And then it says, in this amendment, we wish to maintain the exit criteria 5, the timeline to reach proficiency, but seek to change the definition of adequate progress for the ELP indicator. We are requesting in this amendment to change our definition of adequate progress toward English proficiency from a 0.4 gain in proficiency level from the student's prior year in WIDA access score to individualize progress targets based on 3 determining factors. 1, grade level in which the EL student entered the Utah education system. Now you realize all this makes sense, right? That was the point, because the point 4, like a blanket statement for everybody, you know, I don't know, is not logical. The student's initial English proficiency level, right, when they enter. The amount of time a student has been in Utah's EL program. You see, all of this is really a way for us to get the kind of data that helps us evaluate our language program for which students. And then you should use that to work with your business administrator and everybody else to look at how you're allocating resources to support those schools that aren't making that kind of progress, right? So we're trying to be like really systematic and logical with tools that support you. Okay, so then it says, and this is for those people who are data geeks and other people, the analysis of our historical EL data. Now we didn't, this is what some people say, and this is not offered as a criticism, but as an insight. When people say to you things like, teachers or principals, well, you know, what's happening in the, you know, in the data in relationship to the nation? Okay, we're not the nation. We're Utah. And so we're using the actual historical data from our children, right? Don't let people make those excuses about, you know, our kids aren't doing well, you know, and we're sure that everywhere in the country no EL is doing well, or whatever, I don't know. Okay, so the analysis of our historical EL data and modeling the ELP indicators showed that the current definition of EL progress in our approved plan does not sufficiently differentiate among English learners. And then in the report it gives the appendices to show the methodology. Analysis also showed that the single point 4 expectation was not equitable across all schools, particularly when comparing elementary schools to high schools. This is like a huge issue. We all know this, right? In seeking this amendment, Utah is trying to acknowledge and value the unique background of each EL in our EL population and set rigorous yet achievable progress toward progress targets that set EL students on a track for achieving English proficiency and academic success in the content areas. Right? Now, your report card, your school report card, is going to be based on this calculation. Now, this is wonderful, right? But now we have to figure out how we're going to use it so that we can build the capacity of the principals in a way so that it creates positive momentum when we go and we highlight exemplary practices in schools. So I've seen some of the best math instruction in elementary school, well scaffolded, lots of student talk, amazing conversation. I think I've said this before. A little girl in the 4th grade got up. They were in a table of 4. And they were working on a math problem. And so they were working as teams. I'm pretty sure this was 4th grade. And she says to the boy across, you know, so what's your reason for solving it that way? And so he stumbles around trying to explain it. And then so she gets up and stands behind him and she says, oh, you know, I think this doesn't make sense here. Now, this is what we want to see in classrooms, right? Where English learners are not pulled out, but it's well scaffolded and there's lots of student talk, right? With higher DOK levels instead of, you know, what typically, you know, you might see. So that's the piece that's really important. So what questions do you have about the EL indicator? Because there's actually lots of questions here, but because it's already in the agenda. Yes.
So is it going to be under formula to figure that out? How is that going to be calculated on those 3 goals?
Well, you realize that the data and statistic people are doing that right now.
Okay. And they'll let us know how that...
Well, Yeah, I mean, you'll actually get the report card, right? And then you talk to the assessment people. I'm sure we could have Darren Nielsen come back. But the methodology is a series of business rules, right, when you do computer programming to actually calculate that.
I have a question.
Yes.
Will the equations be published so that we can make our own calculations to see if the students are making progress?
You'd have to actually ask the assessment and data people. So when this is actually my suggestion. My suggestion is as soon as you get your report cards, my hunch is the district people will be asking these questions of the accountability department because they're the ones with the data and statistics people have figured this out. Yes, Karen.
Will the school report cards come as an average growth for that school?
I don't know.
Will the district get any sort of a composite final growth for our ELs?
Okay, I have no idea how that is. I've actually seen a mock-up of the school report cards, but other than that, I have, and also in the ESSA Title III plan, it does have the percentages of how grades are going to be allocated. So it was approved that the 9% is going to be for annual growth.
Okay.
Right? So if you have a school and you have 10 English learners, right? And they all make progress, annual growth. Right, because then you'll be able to actually see that on the report card. Not to mention, you could download all this already from the data gateway with individual students. And if you're not using the data gateway with all the EL indicators and the assets, and then there's something seriously flawed about how we don't know how to use data. So, and if you want me to do an entire webinar on that, I'd be happy to do it, even though I have actually done that several times. I'm sure I've talked to several principals. They've never seen the individual WIDA reports, student reports that talk about all the assets. If we actually use these reports, then we wouldn't have teachers thinking that kids can't do things, right? Because you'd have the assets right in front of you. You'd have it written as an individual student. Here's the individual student. This is what they can do. You see what I'm saying? We already have tools, but the question is, how are we going to work together to get principals and teachers to use them when they redesign their instruction? Yeah.
Are you saying then that in ESSA that the 9% growth, is that the standard? And
No.
Okay,
it's not 9%.
What I'm concerned about is like when we got our information that you sent out before the grant management thing was due.
Right.
One of the things that I was concerned about is I didn't know what to compare our percentages with. I mean, I looked at everybody else's and I didn't feel like ours was where I wanted it to be, but I didn't have anything to compare.
You didn't. You couldn't, because in the first place, all of that data, whether it comes to you in WIDA, you would have that as a WIDA report, right?
Right.
But so you have to use the WIDA reports in relationship to what the state provides. But the other thing is, remember, the growth goals haven't been set yet.
Okay, that's what
Okay, the 9%, okay, so if we had a pie, I could show you. The 9% is what will be calculated for your school's grade. The 9% for EL. Because there are other indicators, right? And all the alternative schools then have like 3 other levels of indication, because it's in some ways not really fair, even though they have to use the same assessment system to evaluate the alternative schools' effectiveness based on criteria that's very limited. Because alternative schools, they have a vision and mission in relationship to the needs of whoever they have in their school. And so that system is much more nuanced in relationship to looking at growth, right? So the goal is to look at growth. And I know also in the accountability system there are issues around proficiency. But I would encourage you to really look at the kind of growth your students are making. If you actually looked at individual kids, like if you went to a classroom and you were concerned about a student, and you knew the student, you would go to the WIDA, you would go to the data gateway, you'd put in the school, you'd put in the grade, you'd find out, based on that student, what the issues are related to them not making progress. One of the patterns we found, I found this in certain high schools, that for some strange reason, I'm not going to make a judgment about it, but I'm just saying this is a really interesting pattern, that in the receptive language, right, which is listening and reading, which focuses on comprehension, right, those two things, receptive language, that young women have high scores in listening, and then they have low scores in speaking. But they have higher scores in reading and writing than boys do. Now, I'm not going to say anything in relationship to things that I've seen in classrooms where the people, no offense to the boys, the men in the room, the tendency is that the boys end up getting more talk time or attention for whatever reason. And so that ends up having a direct relationship to what happens in the classroom environment and how you support teachers to ensure that there is actual equitable conversation. Because when you put an English learner with a student who's an English only, and the English learner listens really well but never says anything because they're in the receptive stage, then you have to actually do something about that. You have to work with the teachers so they know their kids. They can't be putting the kids together where there's no opportunity for the English learner to speak. Right? See, it's just logical. So when you talk about data, you should actually think about what's happening in classrooms. There's no connection between data and if you don't see anything happening in classrooms. Whatever is happening in classrooms has the impact on what you see in the data, right? And how you spend money to support which schools. You see, I mean, I don't know.
Can I give an example?
Sure.
So we took our WIDA scores from a year before and so 2017 and 2018, and just looked at the growth. We didn't say how much growth, but and looked at the growth, and we found that our 5th graders and our 6th graders had the lowest growth of all of the grade school growth. And so we know that we've got to work on our 5th and 6th grade district-wide. We also took that down. We're not a huge school district, so we took that down to the school level and to see which schools were doing well in their 5th and 6th grade. What are they doing? How can we help with that? And so it just helped us see where we could put some of that money, where we could put some of that important information. And that was just one example of looking at using our data to see where the needs are.
You see the point? You look for patterns in the data. And then you allocate resources in relationship to working specifically with the principals and the schools related to the classrooms. The data is pretty clear when you do course-taking patterns. If English learners are not proficient by 5th and 6th grade, they do not have any chance at all for early college successes, for making it the transition to middle school effectively. Our data is like this. Kids are doing, decent in elementary. They get to 7th grade, boom. They get to high school, boom.
But what do you do if you get them when they come? I mean, we've gotten quite a few kids that have come right now, like in high school and in
well, then you have to think
school.
more strategically in relationship to the way that you work with them.
You're taking away my hope here.
I'm talking about children who've been in our system since kindergarten.
Okay. Well, some of us, we have those too, but we've just gotten a big influx of kids that have, non-English speakers that come in secondary.
Yeah. Well, everybody all over the country that's happening, but the question is, then how are you going to figure out how to work with them in a very different way? Right? Because the typical way high schools work.
You were just saying, though, there's no hope. I was just like, wait a minute.
No hope for children who have been here for long-term English learners.
All right.
I mean, think about it. if you have kids going to alternative schools, they've been in the system since kindergarten and they're still a level 2.
I agree with you there.
Like, so what does that tell you? See, that's the point about using data.
Right. That makes sense.
You have to know your data. You have to know who your kids are. Right? And then you have to personalize the education. You can't have them sitting in classrooms where you have teachers lecturing them. So how are you going to help the teachers stop lecturing? It's not helping anybody. Adults, you know how much we remember from a conversation when we're talked at? 5%, if we're lucky. Okay, so I want to alleviate your anxiety, and I know you're anxious because of the report cards and the accountability system and that it's so late. But I think the new way of looking at differentiating the way in which progress for individual students is helping us be more accountable for paying attention to individual students, right? Instead of making generalized blanket statements, which I just did. Only because of course-taking patterns. So, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry for the regional rate. So I'm a little confused. I'm probably the only one that's confused.
No, I'm
Talk
sure you're
about
not.
Making progress.
Right.
From what I understand, there's 3 indicators, right? One indicator is the percentage of kids that's making progress within the WIDA, right? There's another indicator that says the percentage of kids who are actually reaching fluent. And the third indicator is the percentage of kids that are passing SAGE, math, reading, language arts, science. So when you say making progress, are you referring just to that one indicator? Or are they lumping those 3 indicators all together somehow to say that kids are making progress?
Okay, so
does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And if you look at the Title I report, it does, because it's more detailed, and I can't answer these questions because it's really the accountability system and the people who are determining it. But if you actually look at the Title I program, it talks about growth in math, English, and science, right, by disaggregated groups, which means they're going to have a growth indicator for academic growth toward proficiency by disaggregated groups in those content areas. So it's a system that considers success in academics by different groups. Special ed students, English learners, right? So the disaggregated group would be what you would pay attention to, obviously, if you're working with English learners. Because as we know from SAGE, who's the lowest performing group in Utah? Even below special ed? English learners. Now, if we know that, and we've known that for over 10 years, then we should be paying attention. And now that it's in the state accountability system, we're going to have to. But I don't know about the calculations, right? I only know about the percentages. I don't know how that's going to be. So here's a question. How will Title I have oversight over Title III program? Okay, Title I doesn't have oversight over Title III. Because remember, programmatic issues are in Title III. It just so happens that Title III accountability is in Title I.
So when you say accountability, are you saying that we have to separate with the application? We share that accountability, or that's what I'm confused on.
Well, you would actually braid funds from Title I. You know, so let's say, for example, we'll just use an example. So let's say next year when you get your, well, we don't even have to say next year. We'll say in December. In December when you get your school report cards. And you see, let's say there's a Title I school, and you look at the report card and ELs are doing poorly. Okay, then you would combine, and I know districts that do this really well, they'll braid Title I funding, state funding, Title III funding, because remember, it's all supplemental to really support the students in not making progress in that school. you see.
So you're not, when you say we're accountable in Title I for Title III, you're not talking about the grant application process and
No.
Okay.
No, I'm just talking about the accountability system.
Accountability, okay.
But you can do whatever you want, even with the EARS money, you know, the at-risk money. Okay, so you realize that the state legislature increased by, I think, another, what, 10 million or something for the at-risk funds? Okay, so my point is, you should actually be thinking about all those funds in relationship to your accountability system, because you don't want schools to be so discouraged. This is what someone said to me recently in a focus group, that they take out their school, you know, they take their frustration out on English learners and their families when their school grade is connected to progress for English learners. So you don't want, someone said that to me, because they're really stressed out about it. So we don't want that to happen, right? Yeah. So I'm just trying to help you think about how you can be strategic in relationship to using the data, right? And how you're evaluating the effectiveness of your program based on how you're allocating your resources. Provo is a good example, and I think Tooele has taken this up. They do a weighted per pupil allocation with Title III supplemental funding, right, for level ones. Because we know level ones will make huge progress if the quality of the instruction within a year is much better, right? So the way in which you organize high schools and you put Title I, here's another example. There's another district. I'm not sure if Davis does this. I think Davis has the highest percentage of graduation rate of their English learners. I think it's like, what, 89%? So 89% of the English learners in Davis graduate. 83% or 85% of English learners in Park City graduate. If you look at the way they organize high school, in Park City in particular, and they have a content link class where they have a chemistry teacher working with an English teacher and working with, you know, an ELD specialist, they're using their funds differently. Or in Hillcrest, when you see some of the best biology instruction where they're doing co-teaching in the 9th grade in biology. See, you just have to decide, right, how you're going to allocate resources, but it has to be based on data. It has to be based on something. You can't just keep on allocating funds the same way you've allocated funds. And you see no growth. You know, I've gone to schools where the principal, and it really makes me sad, they have no idea who their English learners are. They have no idea how much money they have for them. Now, I don't know. I usually volunteer, and I always say to them, or him or her, I can come and help you. But the point is, what kind of support are we providing for our principals to be visionaries and know the kids, right? And the parents. So could you clarify who can request reimbursement, the person who opens it or the business manager? I think it's always a district decision in relationship. So when you go into the new grants management system, it'll have roles, right? If you haven't ever seen it, it says roles. And then it says all the people who own the grant, right? So I'm the owner, because I'm the program manager, so I own it. But then there are like 6 other people who are checking me, right? Which is a good thing. So you have to find out, if you just have a business administrator doing your budget, based on the way they've always done it or whatever, I think you should ask questions. I'm trying to help you ask questions. So remember, it's all about local control, and so you have so much control. So maybe this isn't true. But the point of local control is that you work with your districts to build the local capacity to do the best kind of work. Right? I mean, that's really the point. So why is the person who accesses, what's UGS? I don't know. So narrow, and why is it the number of people limited to impact the revision?
UGS is Utah Grant System.
I don't even call it that. It's called UGS. That's terrible. You know, one of the things we're going to do, and that's why this piece is really important, is that I'm getting feedback from you so that I can go to the financial ops people, right? Because I have a really good relationship with them because I'm OCD. And then we say, you know, this isn't working for districts, but you also have to speak up, right? You know, I can't be the only one who's saying, here's feedback in relationship to how this system is clunky. There's someone that, you know, we had to do another thing and we couldn't find it. He came up and we spent an hour looking for it. And he's in financial ops, but he had no access to it. See, so are the documents from the site visit visible to all districts? No. When we do site visits, your report, there's a new monitoring function. So Granite's report, Salt Lake's report, Canyon's report, whenever we do the report for Title III visits, we send it to the superintendent and, you know, all the people who were there at the meeting, and then the superintendent decides how to disseminate it. Right? This is not me, like, disseminating reports to everybody on the planet. It's not a public report. It's feedback for you all, right? Now, you'll see that one of the things that I'm recommending in the new grants management system where it's monitoring, so you'll have everything there. So if you have a legislative audit or whatever, you just open it up and you say, oh, well, here's the USBE report. Here is a document that shows how we responded to the recommendations. And now that's going to be a new addition. We can't have people going and giving recommendations and feedback and then nothing changes in the district. So I thought, you know, I wouldn't have to do this, but now I have to. So within 30 days, you have to respond in the monitoring function of the Utah grants based on a recommendation that we provide you that you choose. You choose a recommendation that you're going to respond to. So I'll give you one example of what one superintendent did within, I don't know, 5 days or 2 days. I don't know what he did. This was Martin Bates. We sent him the report. 5 minutes later, he emailed me and said, you know, thank you for the report and, you know, your support and commendations. But more importantly, thank you for your recommendations. This gives us a vision. This gives us support for a vision forward. He emailed me that, like within 5 minutes of me sending him the report. 10 minutes or something like that. Then he gave the findings to the school principals and said, here are the recommendations for your school. I'm expecting a plan on how you're going to address these. So do you see how proactive that is? Everybody knows. There's no secrets. The teachers that we were blown away by, some of the best math instruction in the 8th grade I've ever seen in my life, they were recognized, right? Teachers are recognized. Principals are recognized. And yes, we have things to work on, and here's some recommendations. But, like, what is the problem with that? We're supposed to be, like, all learning together, right, with impartial eyes or people who are coming in and actually have a tool that can help you. So now the requirement is after you get the report within 30 days in the grants management system, you have to upload, and I'll do a template that asks you really simple questions. How are you using the recommendations to support your schools in adjusting their practice? Just a really simple question. Right. Okay, you know I'm a passionate person, so this is not about blaming anybody. This is about saying what doesn't work and trying to scaffold people's experience to help them, right, change their practices. Because systems typically don't change. You always do what you always done, even though it might not work. Not you personally, but, you know, systems. So, no, your individual reports are always yours. They're about you, how you want to distribute them, how you want to use them. It's just like, you know, quality feedback to support you and your decisions. That's all. If our charter is not on the visit schedule, how do we know when the state will visit our LEA? Okay, so in here you have the schedule, and if you want me to come and visit, you know, you can beg me. No, I'm teasing. You can send flowers. It's the last page where it says fall visits. Endeavor Hall, Pacific Heritage, Esperanza, Guadalupe, Freedom Academy, South Summit. I've already visited North Summit. Spring, and then fall, and then spring. And one of the things I've asked you to do is I'll send out a template to you, and if you can give me some dates that work for you. You know, we changed it from this weird, personally, this is my opinion, you know, whenever it's like this rotating schedule for 5 years and then nobody sees you or pays attention to you. Okay, so that's not that. You know, what it is, we're trying to personalize it, so if you want me to come, you know, that's great. And these are the places where I'm visiting, and the larger districts, you know, will have a large team. I think in Salt Lake, we had a huge team of people. We had lots of peer reviewers, and then we have lots of people from, and believe it or not, people from this agency are begging me to come on visits, because then they can actually be closer to what's going on in the classroom. So that's a good thing, right? If we have, you know, because, you know, they do really, from assessment, from teaching and learning, from special ed, you know, all the people across the agency, you know, want to come and visit. Okay, so that's that question. Okay, so some of the I'm assuming this is in the tool. Some of the questions seem redundant. They ask same evidence. Can evidence be consolidated? Well, I'm going to give you. The biggest thing is that you have to write a narrative. You can write the narrative and then put up whatever evidence you want into the. You know, this is the whole thing. The tool is based on the law. I mean, I don't know, what can I say? It's based on the law, and it's based on civil rights. So this provides an opportunity for you to learn what the law is, right? And what the civil rights are for English learners. So it's an education tool as much as it is a tool for the application. See, that's why I did it that way. Okay. What is the new growth goal? We don't know. Can we know we have a timeline with reimbursements will be functional? The most important thing about reimbursements, because they are functional, but if you don't have a plan approved, you're not going to get reimbursed. You can't submit a reimbursement. So you have to work on the plan, right, the application. Having resources available is great in the system. You know, so you have two. You have the application, and then you have the monitoring tool. How do you do a budget revision? What would be the process? So you have to ask the people in the grants management system, because someone did a budget revision. Okay, so my suggestion is when you do a budget, you should be really thorough and OCD in the beginning, so you don't have to do a revision, because the revision process means you have to go through the whole system again, which is really exhausting. Is there a place where we can see only the grants that we own? Well, actually, I think it is. I mean, and if you don't have that access, then you should go to the BA or whomever is your supervisor and say, you know, I need to know, how do you change the ownership in the new system? You know, an act of Congress? I don't know. The only people who are in control of any of that stuff is the district, right? So the district BA and all you would be working with the people here in financial ops to do all that. When I have to change something, you know, I can't do it. I have to go down to the financial ops people, and then we have to change the software. Yeah.
Crystal, could I clarify that one question about see the grants that you own? And this is my experience. Maybe the rest of you could chime in, but when you go into Utah Grants and you look at what the grant opportunities are, everything that comes to your district is there. So you have to sort through. We wonder if there's a way that once we open it and we own it, can that be a, you know, where we don't have to keep going through CTE and all that?
Yeah, we've actually said that too, because that's what happens to me. So when I go and try to find somebody, I can't, I can't find anybody. I have to put all, and then I see all the applications. Then I have to get the code, right? Then I have to put the code in for the specific year, and then those things come up. Right, so it's a problem with the system, and we've already told them that's a problem with the system. Thank you for clarifying.
Great.
No, the DMI is dead for Title III. Okay, the UCA, the DMI, you don't do any of that. That was my intention. My intention was to just, we're kind of the, what shall I say? We're the early adopters. Title III are the early adopters. Because I wanted, and part of it is because I always thought the DMI was clunky and I couldn't really figure out why it would not be connected to the UCA, and then I couldn't figure out how I couldn't ever give you any feedback because if somebody else downstairs didn't do it, then I couldn't get in. So I just thought, we're going to learn this together. We're just going to get into the Utah grants system and we're just going to learn it together. So Title III. So you don't have to do any of that. DMI, UCA for Title III. I know other programs, I don't know, but... okay, so it's same question about adequate growth, 9%. If you ever need a mentor and you're new about things, all you have to do is email me, and I'll get you on my schedule, and we'll spend time together. What percent of student population must EL qualify for Title III funds? That's a financial operations calculation. I never know. They just tell me, and they upload the budget, and they say, now you're in charge of these schools, and this is their allocation. If you don't have more than $10,000, if you don't have the minimum of $10,000, you have to be in a consortium. That is federal law. There's no other way that you can get access to Title III funds if your eligibility and the way in which budgets are allocated is less than $10,000. Right. So you have to be in a consortium. We only have, we have the Duchesne, we only have 2 district consortium. We have Duchesne and we have South Summit, and then we only have 1 charter, which is Ogden Prep. So those are the only consortium. We need data sooner. Yes. Is there any published research on Title III funding distribution formulas at the district level? Okay, so most of the issues related to, and I tried to find this out the first year, we give you the allocation for Title III, whatever the district does with it, it's up to them. Now, the goal is to learn from people who, are using their funds differently, and they're making progress. And so we've tried to give you examples of that. Provo is an example. But there's no research on it other than, we should be learning from each other. Smaller charter schools, no, you have to be in a consortium. When will we get feedback on the application? Okay. If the application is approved, you don't need to worry about feedback. The only way you get feedback is if it's not approved and you have to do something. And I've emailed tons of people already. No, I won't say tons. I've emailed people on by November, let's see, the weekend, November 1st, 2nd, 3rd. By November 3rd, I sent personal emails if there had to be a change. Will we have access to this new system? To some of what we had in the UCA, an example, building eligibility page. Whatever's in the grants management system for Title III is what you have. That's, and the monitoring will be even better, I think. Can we request an informal visit? You have to just call me. How will I? Okay. So any other questions that I didn't address? And we could even, so do you want me to tell you what the new, now you don't have to submit a new, you don't have to submit an application, a new application. I'm just going to give you samples of things that I changed based on what I saw happening this time, right? I'm just trying to mitigate the confusion. of what happened this time. So why don't we go to the first, which actually the second page. So where it says self-assessment tool. So you should cross out assessment and put self-monitoring. Remember, I'm changing assessment to monitoring to help you monitor your own work. And I'm going to do a webinar, and I'll send you the date in December, to give you really good examples of applications that really nailed it. They used multiple sources of data. They explained how they evaluate their program. They told about the process. They told about how they were changing. So really clear. And then other people put a sentence. Okay, so if you actually put a sentence and it asks the question, explain how you're going to, but it's a sentence, okay, so no, that's not an explanation. So list evidence and provide a narrative or include updated LEA handbook. Okay, so ESSA came in 2015. You can't really just put page numbers in the tool of something that you developed, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, right? You have to actually do the updated handbook and then put the page numbers related to your narrative, right? And it could be a sentence or two. But if you have the evidence for it, that's fine. If you're using page numbers as reference and then add hyperlinks, Granite has done this really well. Alpine has done it very well. There are examples of people who, this is just getting you prepared. If you don't have that stuff organized, then this is a way for you, right, to organize it so that if you randomly get picked by the feds, no matter what title program it is, and you're trying to find a binder full of stuff, you don't really need to find a binder full of stuff, right, because it'll be on the grants management system and monitoring. You see, the point of this is trying to help you be organized. So if I, die tomorrow, then it'll be a system that'll work for you. And then eventually USBE updated website will based on the ESSA and the EL indicators. So I'm trying to organize everything. You realize that the website for Title III could never be updated because nothing was actually approved yet, right? And even the Title III plan that was approved had to be redone because the Title I plan wasn't approved. I know it's very complicated. You don't need to worry about it. Please use the tool in the system, which will be revised in the following ways. No longer a self-assessment, but a monitoring tool for visits, aligned to the actual approval questions in the grants management system. So you probably haven't seen it, but I'm going to show you on the new tool. I have to actually check these boxes that say you did these things. Now, I'm not going to check boxes if you didn't do them. But if you don't know what I have to approve, then it's not fair for you, right? So on the new system, I'm going to show you what I have to actually mark. Because I can't mark something that's not true. Because then they ask me if I verify that what I've marked is truthful. So, and the monitoring functions in the grants management system, I think it'll be really great. There are going to be instructions for pre-visits and guidelines. So sometimes when observers go to schools and the principal doesn't know and nobody knows and the observers aren't welcomed and the observers are wonderful, but it doesn't really set a good tone for them to visit schools, right? So you have to actually, you actually have to prepare your principals to actually be welcoming and generous because, we want a commendation like Principal so-and-so created a welcoming environment and blah, blah, blah. We actually want to do that. But when observers go and that doesn't happen, it's hard for everybody. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be truthful about their observations, right? But it doesn't set really a good tone. So, including the guidance for dissemination of the report, the requirements for LEA's response to recommendations. So, you get the report, you have 30 days, and you're going to work with everybody in the district. We're not going to have all these isolated silos where people make decisions and then nobody knows, right? And then you're going to say what recommendation you're going to work on. And you pick. You're going to pick whatever. Yeah.
Do they, in the grants management system, does it notify you? How are we corresponding? Is it through email, or the grant management system is going to notify you that your report's in there, or the things that we need to do? Or?
It's actually, well, first of all, you'll have it all from me, right? And then you'll be paying attention. But then what I found out, because I wasn't getting any emails, because they said we were going to get emails when somebody submitted something. Mm-hmm. But then when I said, how come I'm not getting emails? They said, oh, well, they decided to turn them off because people were getting too many emails. And I said, okay, well then how am I supposed to know when people send in what they're supposed to send in? So one way we do it is if you're on the system and you see pending, then you'll see that, right? And if you don't see something that has to be approved, I think what happens is the letter and everything, you get an whoever owns the program, they'll get the email from your at your district level. That's what I've been told. But, I don't know because
when you say 30 days, and then if I'm not on the system every day, I go in there, it's usually generated because I've gotten an email.
Okay, but you realize, so anybody who's had a visit, you can speak up. Okay, you get a report. Everybody's in a room with me. Mm-hmm. All the principals, in Canyons, it was everybody and their dog. So it was like the superintendent, the assessment director, the research people, the coaching people. It was a huge group of people, which I really appreciated. They get the report. They sit down and work together to see what the next steps are. And it will say, with a template, fill out the template, put it into the monitoring function of the grants management system to see how you're going to respond. We're not deciding what you're going to respond to, how you're going to respond to it. We're just giving you feedback. It's like the example of Granite. Granite did it within, a week. They were clear in a week. And so then they would just say, we sent these, we disseminated the practices, we received a report, this is what we're working on, right? And they just upload it. It's just a response to the recommendations, that's all.
So what you're saying then is that a lot of it takes place face-to-face, and not just through this grant management system.
Yeah.
That's because that was my concern is that, if we're waiting for an email or not knowing an email's coming. But some of it is, and it's just not on monitoring. I'm thinking about our applications, and do we get notified? If
you always get notified when it's approved, because in the system there's a letter that is a grant award.
I understand that, but if it's not approved and we have to do revisions, then how do we find that out?
I email you personally.
Okay. Good.
But I don't know about anybody else.
From you personally yet, so I guess I'm okay, unless you haven't read mine yet.
No, I've read everybody's. Okay. See, isn't this fun? Just think how much we're learning. And I'm trying to develop this so that the feedback you get, you can act on. It's like when teachers give kids feedback and they don't listen to it. Or when you all give me feedback and then I don't ever change what I do. My high school students used to call me on this all the time. They'd say, okay, Estrada, you ask us for feedback, but I want to know what you're going to change. So that's kind of the same thing, right? This because we're learning together. Okay. So we're actually ahead of ourselves. That's kind of strange. So, what I'm thinking of doing? I'm going to give you the new. Now, remember, this is going to be uploaded into the grants management system for the next cycle, right? But I think it would help you if you didn't get your application approved. Do you know what I mean? Some of you, most of you, I think most of the people got their application approved. The other thing is, the reason I give you copies of things is that there are no surprises. But here's the problem. When you use the sample that I email you, and you don't use what's in the grants management system, okay, it doesn't work, right? You have to use what's in the grants management. You have to download what's in the grants management system because that's what's officially approved, okay? Don't use stuff that I give you. I'm just giving it to you so you can see it ahead of time. But when you go into the grants management system, you have to use those 2 documents that are in there. Okay, just download them, fill them out, and then upload them. That's all you have to do, okay? So I apologize for being overly zealous and giving you things so you can give me feedback on, and then you use them because you've been working on it. So I apologize for that. Okay, any other last questions before I send these out to you and give you time to look at them?
What is the status, number 3, of the amendment?
Oh, yeah. The status of the amendment, it's about the EL indicator.
Right.
So it's just been submitted. So that's why I gave you what we submitted.
And we're just waiting to hear.
Well, we're actually not waiting to hear because we have to do the calculations for the report card. So we got assurances, that the way in which we were doing this makes more sense, especially since the calculations were wrong in the first place. They don't really say that, but So that's what the status is. So as soon as you get your report cards, here's the other thing. Look, when you get your report cards, if you want me to come out and help you look at them, you should take advantage of me while I'm around. Do you know what I mean? Just email me and say, we got the report card, and can we, can you come and sit down, and I'll bring some people in, and we'll look at things. That's what I'm here for. I'm supposed to be serving you. Promise me you'll do this. It makes me happier, because then I'm in, I'm actually, in districts, and that makes me happy. Yes?
So, sorry for my lack of understanding, but do all schools receive a report card regardless if they get Title III funds?
Yes.
And does that only go to the principals and directors, or does that go to...
It ends up being public. It's on the public website. It's made public. To the data. Yeah, so the data gateway will have all the report cards. All the data is on the data. So you just go to USBE and then the data gateway, and then you put in, there's a drop-down menu, and it'll say your school. And it'll have all the information there for your school, right?
But your principals should be sharing that.
Well, you'd like to see it actually before the public sees it. I think that's the other thing. No, it's not going to be the PACE report. No. It's a separate, so the whole thing had to be reorganized because of the regulations related to aligning federal accountability with state accountability and what the report card needed to look like. So they're report cards. And they have multiple functions. So here's...
Christelle.
Yes.
I'm a data geek myself. For the 3 new determining factors for individualized progress targets, is there going to be a baseline, and where will that baseline be drawn? Will it be drawn at the individual student, or individual student versus school?
No.
No, okay.
No. Yeah, so even if you go to the data gateway and you look up your school and you look up a certain kid, right, they have all the longitudinal data there, right, for every single kid. So that's the same issue. The same thing is we already have the baseline for WIDA because it was 2016 when they recalibrated it. Right? Okay. So that's how it's going to be organized, based on the recalibration for 2016. You see? Okay. And if you want to stay after, like if you're new and you've never been here before and this is overwhelming, even people who have been here for a long time, it ends up being overwhelming because things are changing. So you should stay. Okay. I have lots of time. Okay. So let's just look at the tool. You notice that there's nothing about compliance and in progress and all that stuff because people kept on putting, compliant, and then nothing else. I'm thinking, okay, that doesn't make any sense. So I just put, please list the documents submitted as evidence. Pages to an LEA handbook must be updated with ESSA. Hyperlinks to a website, narrative, explain. I try to make it open enough so that if anybody audits you actually would have the evidence. That's the point, right? I'm trying to support you here. and in some ways protect you. I'm not like a Jewish mother, but, I have tendencies toward that. Yeah, and so that's what I've done. And it's, out of the statute. It's directly out of the statute. Allowable expenditures, equitable services for private schools. You don't want to get in trouble with an auditor because you haven't done equitable services for private schools. That happened last year. It ends up being like really ugly. So you just have to pay attention to where it says immigrant activities. The only way immigrant funding is calculated, and I've given this to you before, and it'll be on the website, because in 2014 the feds really came down on us. I'm not going to say why, but there was no clarity about how the immigrant funding was allocated, because it's like 5% off the top of Title III. And it ends up being not that much money, maybe, I don't know, $200,000 or something like that. But the only way you qualify is by a formula that shows significant increase in recently arrived students, immigrant students. It's calculated over 2 years. And if that calculation is significant enough to award you more than $10,000, right? Because in the federal law, it's very clear that you have to be in a consortium if it's less than 10,000. So that's the way we calculate immigrant. There are only 4 districts that were eligible for increased immigrant funding. Granite, of course, Canyons, I think Alpine, and Salt Lake. Okay, so it's not divvied up and, given out to everybody. It's only based on significant increase, and that was approved by the feds in 2015. Here's the other thing. So see where it says civil rights for English learners? It's near the, yeah. So this is what I found out. I changed the 3-point scale to a 4-point scale. Not that I don't trust people, but people kept on putting, this is on page, I don't know what page it is, but it's near the end, where it says civil rights for English learners. So this is like assurances in relationship to, evaluating your own practices based on civil rights issues. So if you don't know civil rights issues related to English learners, then guess what? Someone could submit a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights, and then you would be investigated. Okay, so it's better that you know what you have to do than wait for someone to do a complaint. Now, the reason I changed the scale is that people kept on putting things like successful implementation when it's clear that there was none. Now, I'm not accusing anybody of dishonesty, but I'm just saying I think the way I organized this didn't really help people evaluate honestly what the civil rights were for English learners. Right? So I'm just trying to support people to really use resources effectively and be honest about what's happening in their schools. That's all. When the EL population hardly has any access to early college coursework or gifted and talented programs, okay, then you can't say successful implementation, right? So I changed it to have the person actually do the initial for each one, and then based on your self-assessment. So you're going to assess yourself, not achieved, partially achieved, in progress, successful implementation with results. Now, it's okay to put in progress, because then you're going to work on it, right? Putting successful implementation with no results, okay, so that, no, you can't do that. I mean, you wonder. It makes you wonder, really. Okay, so now are you ready to, these are the things that I have to sign my life away to get approval for your application. So it's the last page. And comments. When I put comments in there, it goes back immediately to whoever filled this out. Whoever owns Title III. Now, I don't know who owns Title III, do you know, in your district? So whoever owns it, you have to go to them. And you have to say to them, okay, so was there also feedback in the grants management system that helped us beside Christelle's email? Okay, so look, application has met the eligibility criteria for this award. Okay, yes, because you're in the system. I don't do anything about that. Application is complete and contains all required elements. Okay, the only two required elements, because the instructions to help you fill it out are there, is the assessment tool and the application. If you want to add other documents that support those, that's fine. In some ways, that's a good thing because then you don't have to have it somewhere else. The budget have been reviewed and contains necessary level of detail. Okay, so the assessment tool and the application will help you do that. Because the application asks you, based on student data, how are you allocating funds? You see? So you have to have the application connected to the budget. Okay. Plan costs are allowable, allocable, and reasonable. And so I have a template to give you, which is the allowable cost template. I don't know. I'm thinking about loading it so that you can just check it off. Do you know what I mean? Because then you wouldn't be in trouble if someone comes to you and says, okay, well, we audited you, or I get an internal audit complaint, and they say, you know, the English learner program at this high school does not represent federal law. That was one recently that I got. And so when it's in the internal audit and it's a complaint, then what do I have to do? I have to investigate. It's not like Sherlock Holmes either. So, you know, and it ends up being stressful for superintendents because then I have to email the superintendent and say there was an internal audit complaint and now we have to do an investigation. It's stressful for everybody, right? So I'm just trying to protect you to make sure that you're paying attention to the detail. And I don't know, if you think the template is and you just check off allowable expenditures right from the law, because it's pretty broad, then that might help you. I mean, I don't know. You can look at it and then you can let me know what you think. Proposed program scope has been reviewed and complies with programmatic requirements. That's the LEA assessment tool. So you see what I'm doing? I'm connecting the assessment tool and application to what I have to verify that you've done. Right. I mean, I can't verify things you haven't done because in the system, it requires me to do that, right? It's my legal responsibility. Applicant has agreed to comply with the appropriate assurances and the program-specific requirements. So it's the application questions with the assurances and the civil rights obligation. So I have to say that you've agreed, right, that you're going to comply with civil rights obligations. So I'm just saying. So what I tried to do on the application, which I gave out, is I changed the first question. Now remember, all of you who've been approved, you don't have to worry about this. And if you want to email me, if you're worried that you got approved, you can. So it's the same question, but it says, report indicators in the self-assessment tool to evaluate the effectiveness of your language program. Okay, see where it says 5 ESSA reporting indicators? Okay, so as soon as you get your report card and you want me to help you, I will. Then what you have to do is you have to evaluate based on the data if your program is effective, right? Okay, if you see glitches like Ogden did about the 5th and 6th grade, then you have to figure out what you're going to do about it, right? Work with the principal, work with the 5th grade teachers, find other schools where the 5th and 6th grade are like flying, right? And then use them to help those teachers. Describe your evidence based model of instruction and curriculum materials that are supplemental to those purchased with the state. Okay, so you're describing that what evidence-based model that you're using. I also have a template that could help you understand what that means. You can't just, in the UCA, people would just list their materials. Okay, so this is about describing. This is not about listing materials. Yes, you add the materials, but you're describing how you're using those materials that is focused on an evidence-based model for instruction. Okay. 3, explain how you allocate resources to individual schools with charter schools or an ELP level in a single school. So charter schools, when they filled it out, they didn't fill this out because they don't have individual schools. Their charter is their school, right? So then you would find out in your charter if there's I've been to charter schools, and, there are some exemplary practices. So if you have a charter school and there's an exemplary practice, then why wouldn't all the classrooms in the charter school look like that? Okay. So that's an easy one. And then list specific grades, if a single charter, or schools that did not meet the interim growth goals. So as soon as you get your report card for your schools, right? So Davis, you have all these schools. First thing you do is you look and see if they made their growth goals, the schools, right? And then you figure out how you're going to work with them. You can't just keep giving them the same allocation of resources and not help them know how to use it, right? You have to actually pay attention to which schools are struggling. And I know you do, but sometimes in those struggling schools, there's amazing instruction, but it's only one teacher, right? So I'm trying to help you identify those. And then budget narrative, explain how funds are being used to supplement programs, activities primarily funded by state. Your explanation must focus on student learning outcome data with the statement. Okay, so I keep on trying to say, if you have kids who are not making progress and they're pulled out constantly, okay, so then wouldn't you evaluate your pull-out program? Right? I mean, really. I mean, I'm just asking. You just can't keep doing the same thing over and over again when your kids aren't making progress. So I've tried to clarify, the application questions, and then when I do a webinar, I'm going to use exemplars so you can see what that looks like, right? Because it's hard. I mean, maybe you don't think it's hard, but I think it's hard to evaluate when you're not clear about the data. The only thing I added to the assurances at the very bottom is the LEA will respond within 30 days to at least 2 USBE recommendations in the official monitoring report for the most recent visit and will disseminate the report to the LEA's leadership. Right? So the point is, this can't be sent to somebody and then it's hidden somewhere. None of the principals know, none of the teachers know, nobody knows. And the feedback isn't used to change what you're doing. So I'm trying to give you leverage to actually have an impact on the way your district is organized. I'm not going to say anything more than that because I think you know what I mean. So that's how I change that. Okay, questions. This is like a teacher giving instructions and realizing that originally the instruction really sucked. And you look at the result and you think, oh boy, I blew that one. How am I going to change it so I can help people? Because it's what we're asking is challenging. I did that all the time with my students, and they were really clear about, what I didn't do very well. So, okay. So these two last things I'm just going to give to you. It's the thing that I told you about the allowable expenditures that then you could just check off so you wouldn't be freaking out about, oh, is this supplemental? Oh, can I do this? Oh, what if someone does this and I get audited? So I'm going to give this to you so you can see. It's right from the law. And It's very broad. It gives you lots of space for you to use funding and braid it with other funds, so, and if it's going to help you, then you just email me and say, or I'll send something out, a survey. I'll send a survey out and you say, this is the feedback I want you to give the financial ops department to make the grants management system easier, so feedback, real concrete feedback. And then if you think that we could upload this for the application for the budgeting so you can actually just check and see, right? So this would be like part of the instructions to help you see if your budget is connected to allowable expenditures. Because I have to say that you did this and that I approve it. So if I'm not giving you information and you don't know, like it's my fault, right? It has nothing to do with you, it's me. Okay, so that's this one. So you should look at that. You don't have to look at it now, but that's the reason I'm giving it to you. And then the last one is when we get an internal audit complaint from downstairs, there's a huge process that you have to use that's fair and not stressful for the LEA or the charter. If there's an internal audit complaint about how funds are being used or misused for Title III, then I have to investigate. But we don't want it to be so stressful, right, that people are freaking out. So I worked with the internal auditing department to develop a policy and procedure and a level of communication that would support, for example, a superintendent over an LEA or, the director of the charter school, so that it isn't blaming and accusatory and negative. We want it to be a positive experience. We don't, people who do pages and pages of how English learners are being disenfranchised in districts, and they submit it downstairs. Okay, we have a legal obligation to actually find out what's going on, right, and help the LEA and the charter. Not to blame them or punish them or anything like that, right? It's like my responsibility for technical assistance. So, and if you want to come on Tuesday morning to do mindfulness with me, alleviate your stress, you can. So, anyway, so I'm hoping that this is, really helpful for you. Because people get really confused about supplement, not supplant, right, and the federal regulations related to what's allowable, what's not allowable. And if you actually have it, right, and it's uploaded into the system, then you don't need to worry about it. And you can help your business administrators and whoever else owns the grant, because you might not. How many of you in this room own the Title III grant? You know what I mean? You're the owner of the grant. Okay, good. Well, I shouldn't say good, it's like 4 people. But anyway, the question is then how do you inform or help the people, right, in charge of the grant to use the kind of data that you all know would be important for which schools? You see, it's all about kids. So any other questions? I bombarded you, so I apologize. But I'm trying to figure out how I can support you.
This might be really dumb, but it says 5 ESSA reporting indicators, but then there's 6 dots. Are there 6?
No, there are 5.
Okay, so what am I missing?
You're not missing anything. This is it's just a typo. The 5 ESSA reporting indicators are. Oh, I see. The percentage of ELs. I'll check. I didn't put the law in there. Let's see. 1, 2, 3.
We went through the whole thing.
The number of percentage of EL learners challenging. You know what? It's also on the tool, on the self-assess. It's on the monitoring tool where it says reporting. So does someone have a copy of the reporting one? Yeah, that one. Okay. So let's see. There's probably a discrepancy. And you should never say it's a dumb question. Because, they're asking the same question.
I think the first dot is, I think the first bullet shouldn't have been a bullet.
Oh, okay.
Look at it and confirm right off.
Yeah, the first is just.
Oh, yeah, it's not, yeah, it's just asking the question. You see, because the reporting, as described in the law, it's just asking the question, does the LEA use these, right? And then it gives the number and percentage of ELs who are making progress, the number and percentage attaining language proficiency, the number and percentage of ELs who exit the program, a number and percentage of English learners meeting challenging state requirements, the number and percentage of English learners who have not attained proficiency within 5 years. That comes straight from the law. So those are the ones. See, the long-term English learner issue ends up being, well, you all know, I don't have to tell you. It ends up being a big issue when they've been in our system since kindergarten, right? And then they go to high school or they go to middle school and they're still like stuck at a level 3. Because you realize getting stuck at a level 3 ends up happening because what? More challenging academic content that, you know, is more challenging. And if the instruction doesn't change, then they still get stuck there. Right, and we don't want that, right? Okay, other questions? Yes. Oh, here, sweetie.
Just interested on the internal auditor's complaints. Sometimes it's helpful for us to know what those current waves of issues are across the state. And I'm wondering if you could just share the general concerns that are being expressed so we could heighten our attention to that.
Yeah. Okay, so the two complaints that I got, well, and one of the there was one complaint that was 3 pages long, another one that was much longer, and it was really connected to programmatic issues for English learners that districts were not supporting English learners in the way in which they designed programs to support them. So this whole idea of how are you evaluating the effectiveness of your language programs? Someone said to me, I can't even remember where it was, so if somebody said it here, please don't be offended. And there was another place where, specifically the high school kids and some of the middle schools, they have no motivation in any way to do WIDA because in their mind, all they can think about is they want to get out of this ELD class because it's so awful. And they say things like, well, if I can take the test, is this how I get out of this? So the fact that that's kind of what kids think about, ELD support is troubling. And then when you get internal audit reports and they say that the language program for EL students isn't supporting them, and those were the two complaints that I got. And as a consequence, we don't think funding for Title III is being used appropriately. So see how they make the leap? And that's why they send it to the internal audit. Because they actually look at what's happening in the school, and then they have questions about it, right? And then they say, well, this is not good for kids, so they're probably not using Title III funds or anything else to make this a quality program. And so then they write the complaint. When I get the complaint, I always email the superintendent and then have a conversation with the superintendent ahead of time. And then provide everything that we need, and I do all the front work ahead of time. So I try to look at the data, I look at their program issues, I get all the fiscal accounts, so I get all the accounts, look at all the reimbursement requests, see, because I should be doing that all ahead of time, and then I just let him know, or her know, what it is we'll do when we come to visit, so that, they're not stressed out. And yes, we do visit classrooms, and yes, we spend lots of time with parents. Lots of time with parents. Sometimes superintendents and district people have to pull me out, or they just wait. Most of my conversation with parent groups ends up being between an hour and a half and 2.5 hours with parents of English learners who are incredibly distressed, generally. So,
Christelle, it sounds like, thank you. It sounds, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, that there is a disconnect between what the written programs are and the fidelity at the class level.
well, I wouldn't
to those programs.
Well, I actually wouldn't say fidelity. So I wouldn't use fidelity. The reason I'm not going to use fidelity is part of the problem is when there are initiatives that are mandated and teachers are trying to do things with fidelity, but they're not paying attention to who the English learners are or their families, and the kids aren't making progress, then I don't see the point. I mean, the point is, we should be paying attention to, who the learners are in the classroom and how we're supporting teachers to do that in a way that they're not so stressed out and discouraged that the kids get on their last nerve. I mean, you know what I'm saying. We can't have like angry teachers because they're not supported or everything is so mandated that, they're checking boxes off. There's no quality feedback for them. So the question is, how are we going to work with principals, instructional coaches, to create a more learning environment that's welcoming and encouraging? We can't have kids being stressed out and parents crying, right? So, I mean, I'm just saying this from my experience. Obviously I'm not making this up, right? So how do we want to create schools that are welcoming, encouraging, positive environments for students whose lives, in many, many ways, because they're trying to learn English and learning a system, is kind of at odds with them. That's all. Like, wouldn't you want to go to a place that's welcoming and encouraging and, you'd like to be? Right? That's kind of the point. So you just think about your schools, and if your schools are that. Then if they're not that, then what are you going to do to help them be that? Right? That's all. Right? It sounds, I know I'm making it I'm making it kind of simple because we're looking at systems. But we can do it if we work with each other. We can't have, the special ed department telling the ALS people something, and the literacy people telling the special ed people something, and people, changing IEPs, and I don't know. We can't. I don't really get it. It'd be a lot happier if the adults could actually work together. So I'm just saying. Any other comments? Yes.
When you do your parent focus groups or your chat with parents, do you work on a format or?
There are only two questions.
Just take questions.
No, there are only two questions I ask.
Okay.
The only two questions are, and this is what I do with the principals too, people who have been in the meetings with the principals. I just ask the parents, what are the things that have helped your students in school? That's it. What are the things that haven't been helpful for your students? That's all. Really direct. With principals, I say, what are the things that you're proud about in supporting English learners? Right? Simple. So that gives the principals a chance to do what? To talk about building on successes, things that they've noticed, all that kind of stuff. And the district people not to dominate, and to listen. No offense, district people. Okay, to actually listen to the principals, right? And then I ask the principals, what are the challenges that you face? And then it comes out, right? Same question, instructional coaches. What are the successes? What works well for you? Blah, blah, blah. What are the challenges? And then it all comes out. Why? Because they're honest and it's a safe environment for them to say what's really hurtful. So, and I think that's a really important piece. The people that are most impacted by the decisions districts and state offices and board members make, right, the people who should have influence on that are the people who are most impacted by that, right? Which are the children and the family of Utah. They're the ones whose future is determined by the decisions we make, but we don't ask them, right? So parents of English learners actually know the difference between the homework given to their children and the homework given to other children as not quality. They tell me that. So they're not fooled. That's the other piece. And, I'm a direct person, and I think it's better to be honest and direct with people so we can do something about it, instead of pretending those things aren't happening. Right? It doesn't help anybody. Okay, any other questions? So anybody who's been on a peer review with me, do you want to say anything about it, or have been involved in that? I would appreciate you saying something. Yeah, Nancy.
I just got to go on a peer review in Canyons, and it was enlightening and amazing. I love the tool that you're using for the classroom visits, and just to see the differences between the teachers and bring, the depth of knowledge in particular was really interesting to me, to include that as part of the observation. It was a great learning experience for me. Now I want to go see all of my schools in every class, but anyway, it was wonderful. It was a great experience.
Yeah, if you're interested in this, just a hard copy of the self-assessment tool, because I think I think I've sent it out electronically. I don't know, but maybe not to everybody. We have the DOK level here that focuses on what students are doing, and then evidence for scaffolding, graphics, linguistics, visuals, kinesthetic, the percent of student talk in relationship to teacher talk, and then the evidence of student engagement. So I'll just put this up here if anyone's interested. There are also books in the back that you should take if you want. But then anybody else who's been on a peer review or has been a subject of a visit or is,
I'm Connie, and I also went to Canyon School District last for their visits, and I just want to ditto what Nancy said, that I love the observation tool that they use. It's very concise, it gives you the specific criteria. I know in our district, our evaluation tool that we use for teachers has 30 indicators, and so the tool that we're using to specifically look at observe ESL strategies in the classroom is much. I really like that, and I love visiting other schools too.
I also went, and I think the most helpful thing for me was I was a little intimidated when I first looked at the observation tool, but having Christelle go with us to the first class and observing that class and then getting feedback to kind of see, oh, this is what she's looking for and this kind of thing. So that was helpful now to go back to our district and help our teachers with that.
Thank you. Yeah. Karen.
And I was the...
It's not on.
Is it on now? Yeah. I was the recipient of this wonderful opportunity. And I have to tell you, having been around a long time, I've had lots of audits in my life. Never have I had this level of support. And, it wasn't about just compliance, but the reality is if you are doing what's best for kids and if you're giving teachers the tools they need, the compliance pieces take care of themselves in many ways. But the level of professional dialogue that we were able to have surpasses anything I've ever had. So if you are up to have a visit, count that as one of your great events of the year. Because when Christelle said, she's trying to give you tools that you can use to further the work in your district, give you leverage, that's what I think this will be for us. And we need that. So I was very appreciative and, hope to be able to go to another district and learn from them too.
Yeah.
Also, as a recipient, I ditto everything Karen said, but I also really appreciated the specificness of the such and such a teacher has this practice going on, and we should disseminate that widely. I think it's going to be a real shot in the arm for schools to actually say, look, we have a place where it's very exemplary, and it was really positively stated even in the recommendations. So it may, I think people are going to receive the report really, really well as, like you said, an opportunity, not a gotcha. It was done really, really well. It was one of my days when I just went, oh, this was uplifting when you're thinking, oh, that report's coming. I hope it's not. But thank you. It was done in a really productive way.
Anyone else? And also on the feedback sheet, make sure if you want to be a peer reviewer that you fill it out and tell me the grade level, because we have Jordan coming up and quite a few. Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's an incredible privilege, because the goal, really is about this ancient Confucian principle, which is the extent to which one is happy is the extent to which you create conditions for other people to do their best work. And I'm not saying it from the original Chinese, but I'm just giving you the flavor of it. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to give you tools and strategies and leverage and support to do your best work, right? We all want to do that. So any other questions before we go? And I would really encourage you to be a peer reviewer. And the fact that the people who are the peer reviewers, and if there are people from the district, like we also had someone from Canyons come and they did the peer review with the other colleagues so they could see what that experience was like. And when we debriefed it, it's really valuable to have more than one person doing a debrief when you do an observation. So I would really encourage you to pair up with people when you go observe classrooms and if you use the evaluation tool. Because just, people see different things, right? And so the advantage of having 2 people or 3 people or whatever makes a big difference. And, we end up learning quite a bit. So I just want to tell you what a privilege it is to work with you. I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving and a holiday. In January, I'll be in India, but I'll see you in February. Okay, so thank you so much.